discern anything. Suddenly I was aware of two contrary states, fear and desire. Fear of the threatening dark cavern, desire to see what marvels it might contain. Longing for the source, like that of the moth for the light. In the godlike expansion of nature and man, something has replaced the demon adversary of Christian good. What Leonardo saw from his summit of thought was not only the fury of war, della crudeltà dell'uomo, but deeper, the smiling enigma of force, as in Carnot's second law, that energy quickens by its own decay. Force I define as an incorporeal agency, an invisible power. It is born in violence and dies in liberty, and the greater it is, the more quickly it is consumed. It desires to conquer and slay the cause of opposition, and in conquering it destroys itself. Without force, nothing moves. Axiomatic that in the 1500 dream of calm, where Satan slacks off, entropy appears. For the strongest contrast of that south and north against Leonardo, 1452 to 1519, set Bosch, about 1450 to 1516, deep in transreal Gothic, what spoke at the same time in every man, English morality play from the Dutch. Here shall you see how fellowship and jollity, both strength, pleasure, and beauty, will fade from thee as the flower in May. For ye shall hear how our heaven King calleth every man to a general reckoning. Give audience, and hear what he doth say. God, where art thou, death, thou mighty messenger? Go thou to every man, and show him in my name a pilgrimage. The structures are medieval, but as in a process of mineralization, every grain has been replaced. In the cast of art and drama, Bosch meets with Leonardo. For centuries his forebears had been filling in and individualizing Gothic, this 1440 Hell Gate as mouth and arse, fitting Christian vision to the feel of man and matter. The moral fact boiling from the church close to the square in all those guild towns may be measured by the stage direction in the castle of Perseverance. Look that the devil have gunpowder brenning in pipes in his hands and in his ears and in his ears when he goeth to battle. So the created earth painted on the closed wings of Bosch's Garden of Delights may be medieval in conception, an egg of land and water, cloud and sky, closed in a crystalline shell, but its space reaches into the future, wonderful as the iconography with which Bosch peoples it. Revolution floats in amniotic calm before the battle of values begins, visionary as Ockegham's Mass for the Dead. "1,500 Dunbars, grosser sins, then idleness at the second call, came like a sow from a mud-hole. He had a sleepy snout, many a swag-bellied, sluggish glutton, many a lazy slut and sloven were servants in his rout." The spread altar reaches from Adam and Eve through the pursuit of happiness to a hell landscape of satanic mills. Obrecht's Marian Mass for 3 to 7 voices and tied by a cabal of number symbols has that spectral vastness. But it is the older Ockegum who rides the hell energy cresting under halcyon calm. Save the soul from fiends and from the lake of hell, de manu inferni e de profundo lacu. A window into the soul of Europe on the verge of colonial conquest and Protestant war, and with Bosch, as if sprouted from the aspri sterpi of Dante's wood of suicides, compare a Gawain Douglas dream of 1501. My ravished spirit in that desert wasteful drew to the margin of a river hateful, that like Cocytus the ugly stream infernal, with its vile water made a hideous trouble, spilling overhead, blood red and impossible it should have been a river natural. This loathly flood like rumbling thunder routed, wherein the demon fish so elvish shouted, their wild yelps deafened and benumbed my hearing. At those grim monsters my weak spirit doubted. None through the soil but spunky trees there sprouted, combust, barren, bloomless, no leaf bearing, old rotten runts wherein no sap was working, the most part waste, with withered branches moulded. It was a den well fit for murderers lurking. Wherefore I was myself right sore aghast. The whistling wind blew many a bitter blast. The bare limbs rattled, I could scarcely stand. Out through the wood I crept on foot and hand. The river stank, the trees they clattered fast. That soil was naught but marsh and slime and sand. Small wonder if earthly joy, stemming such a demonism as would haunt succeeding centuries, should be ensphered by Bosch in vegetable bubbles. Was not the humanist hope of Leonardo and his time so islanded? The 1507 Symposium Castiglione celebrates in the courtier a discourse opened by Della Rovere, who would kill his sister's lover next year, a cardinal then, for smiling at him, and connive, it was said, at the sack of Rome, while Bembo, poet, climber, and libertine, afterwards papal secretary and cardinal, closes it with a paean to platonic love. Let us climb up the stairs, which at the lowermost step have the shadow of sensual beauty, to the high mansion place where the heavenly, amiable, and right beauty dwelleth, which lieth hidden in the innermost secrets of God. Meanwhile the dawn has come, nature espousing the flight of the soul. When the windows then were opened on the side of the palace that hath his prospect toward the high top of Mount Cattray, they saw already in the east a fair morning like unto the colour of roses, and all stars voided, saving only the sweet governess of heaven, Venus, which keepeth the bounds of the night and day. Though the gleaming nature of this Giorgione background was dawning everywhere, even in English poetry, till at the last I came to a dale, beholding Phoebus declining low and pale, with my greyhounds in the fair twilight, I sat me down for to rest me all night. That is from Hawes' Pastime of Pleasure, Grand Amour's quest for love and virtue, still, like this Flemish miniature, also of 1500, cultivating the garden of the romance of the rose, Hawes. Amidst the garden there was resplendissant a dulcet spring and mellifluous fountain, beside which fountain the most fair lady, la belle Pucelle, was gaily sitting. In the interfusion of Gothic and rebirth, the airy transparency of the miniature ripens, as the myth of chivalry swells toward Ariosto. From 1490 on, Dürer had applied those skills to a landscape liberation of the forest-cleared and fruitful Germany before the outbreak of religious wars, against Hell Bosch, a faith as natural as Cornish would voice in Tudor English. Pleasure it is to hear iwis the birdies sing, the deer in the dale, the sheep in the vale, the corn springing. God's purveyance for sustenance it is for man. Then we always to give him praise, and thank him then, and thank him then. The easy polarities of century and geography blur. 1495 finds both Bosch and Dürer in the north, in Italy the Piagnoni beside Leonardo. Though what was uppermost was humanist, the Christian myth composed to classical drama. In Josquin's deep lament for Ockeghem, nymphs of the woods and streams join in the Requiem Aeternam. With Josquin's lament, written in Italy to a French poem for a Flemish master, we have ranged Leonardo's Last Supper, most famous picture in the world, with this anonymous entombment carved in a pilgrimage church near Reims. How Christian Platonism has quieted Gothic pain. Erasmus. He is the true theologian who teaches that all good men should be loved and cherished equally as members of the same body, that evil men should be tolerated if they cannot be corrected, that those who mourn are blessed and should not be deplored, and that death should even be desired by the devout, since it is nothing other than a passage to immortality. From the same essay, what else is the philosophy of Christ, which he himself calls a rebirth, than the restoration of human nature, originally well formed? In the Christ study, as in most of his works, Leonardo proclaims that restoration. The new tomb grows shadowed and calm, as in Stephen Hawes, after the day there cometh the dark night. For though the day be never so long, at last the bells ringeth to even song. The transforming death poem had been written in Italy in the 1480s by the imprisoned politician and humanist Colinuccio. Though the close turns to Christ, who in dying made death sweet and beautiful, dolce bella morendo fe la morte, the body of the ode invokes Platonic release, as sacra, splendida, generosa, inclita, the comfort of the soul, come pure from heaven, weary of a world of tumultuous and elemental war. This hymn to death, for every shipwrecked soul, the port of healing, O porto salutar, che sol conforte d'ogni naufragio il mal, splendida morte, swells with the personal pity and anodyne, which caused the statue of Guidorello, warrior, who died in 1501, to be kissed and prayed to as to a romantic saint. In the general amplification, not only Pico della Mirandola acclaimed man as unlimited self-maker, thou, restrained by no narrow bounds, according to thy own free will, in whose power I have placed thee, shalt define thy nature for thyself. Ficino had extended the Platonic flight to a temporal progress toward Godhead. The soul desires, endeavors, and begins to become God, and makes progress every day. Hence our soul will sometime be able to become, in a sense, all things, and even to become a god. How could Machiavelli, facing the 1512 Leonardo, think Christianity had sapped will and drive, where the inner dynamic, against the classical, was so recklessly advanced? Whatever wrought the change was active also in the northern towns. Peter Fischer cast this St. Paul in Nuremberg about the time Leonardo sketched his own image and Raphael chose it for Plato's in the school of Athens, conscious nobility ceding itself over Europe. Yet in that augmentation a deeper cleavage, as between reason and heart, was to rack the century. It is the separation of enlightened, conforming humanism from militant conscience as categorical guide. I laid a hen's egg, said Erasmus. Luther hatched a bird of another kind. Durer's possession by the nude self as the man of sorrows recalls Luther's insistence as he tore up the bull, so hilf mir Gott, ich kann nicht anders. Suppose, Erasmus had answered Luther on free will, that in a certain sense it is true that God works both good and evil in us, and rewards his own works in us, and punishes his evil ones. What a door to impiety this pronouncement would open if spread abroad in the world. Against that dialectic prudence, Luther flames in Christ's seizure. God foresees, purposes, and does all things according to his immutable, eternal, and infallible will. By this thunderbolt, free will is utterly dashed to pieces. Peace and tranquility of flesh are with you of greater consideration than the word of God. Let me tell you this, I am seeking an object so great it ought to be maintained and defended through death itself, even if the whole world should be hurled into chaos and reduced to nothing. And yet Erasmus, in his strangest work, In Praise of Folly, reaches, like Durer's Christ-man, toward the revelation of comic paradox. Lear's fool, Cervantes mocked night as saving clown. Since, in praising folly, in a way not wholly foolish, Erasmus juxtaposes three masks, the laughable, as of old women in heat, which opens to the life-giving illusion of Sisyphus. All things are presented by shadows, yet this play is put on no other way. The mask of depravity, which he castigates, and third, in the last reversing chamber of the Silenus, the noble follies of Platonic thought and Christian charity, where a taste of future happiness drowns our knowledge of the world. Bosch's 1515 Bearing of the Cross has no weirder transition. In taking up the weight of the new century and of Leonardo's grotesques, late Bosch prepares for the Protestant agony. Earth and soul so fallen that man is mere stercus, a pile of dung, which only the snow of Christ can cover, so that God looking down may see the purity of his own salvation. Luther. The human will is a beast between. If God sit thereon, it wills and goes where God will. If Satan sit thereon, it wills and goes as Satan will. Yet how satanically ambiguous God's Lutheran sitting. When I fart in Wittenberg, they smell it in Rome. From 1500 to 1520, before the North became a battleground, the life that would polarize and harden swirls in the temporal wake of art-loving and indulgence-peddling Rome. Is there a richer delight than in the fairy-tale Christianity Altdorfer shares with folk song? Es ist ein Ros entsprungen, aus einer Wurzel zart. Luther, too, joins that dance in his Gabriel hymn. Vom Himmel hoch, da komm ich her, ich bring euch gute neue Meer. Not to mention the rose of Sharon wonder of his Bible. Ich bin eine Blume zu Saron und eine Rose im Tal. Luther's favorite musician was Senful, whose most fetching piece is a Christmas bell song. This Catholic joy smiles the immediacy of Protestant birth. In Grunewald, joy sharpens with the prick of pain. So the great Faust cry of Hutton, the spirits awake, there is love and joy in living. Die Geister erwachen, es ist eine Lust zu leben, sounds from the breaking wave. History is powered by tragic excess. Reformation only to be pushed by a temperament capable in its prime of Luther's imperative of freedom. I declare that neither Pope nor Bishop nor anyone else has the right to impose so much as a single syllable of obligation upon a Christian man without his own consent. Why were Christ and all the martyrs put to death? Because without consulting the preservers of old knowledge, they brought forth a new thing. And after, of lashing out at the poor who had taken his freedoms to heart, against the thieving and murdering hordes of the peasants, whoso can strike, smite, strangle, or stab, secretly or publicly, such wonderful times are these that a prince can better merit heaven with bloodshed than another with prayer. The poor thereafter to call him not Luther, but Lügner, liar. The Grünewald legend has this core of truth, that Martis der Maler did go Lutheran, against his church, his patron, and his daring art. And in England, the fiercest genius of music, Taverner, repented after 1528 of popish ditties, destroyed what he could, and closed his life breaking church windows and despoiling altars. What survives that visionary adventure? The humanist North roused to Erasmus 59, age of gold. Reason is as great as a king, a divine counselor presiding in its high citadel. Remembering its origin, it thinks of nothing sordid, of nothing base. Hutton, a precursive Tom Paine, summoning German youth. Come hither, all ye who want to be free. Here the tyrant